Hello. Um, Let me welcome you to our last session for today. I would like to thank to all of you who have been with us for the most part of the sessions today. We had so much wisdom shared and so much experience. And now I would like to welcome our guests who are based, one of them is based in Beirut right now, and the other one, I believe, is in the US. So these are Mark Glovinsky and Valentina Gotcheva. Mark Glovinsky is program manager for the Learning Passport Initiative, collaboration between Microsoft, UNICEF, Cambridge University. So, Mark, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm coming to you live from Beirut, Lebanon, where I was just looking at some of the implementations of the Learning Passport. Very exciting. Lebanon is a bit of a crazy place right now, but it's always good to be in town. I'm formerly based in New York City at UNICEF headquarters. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the Learning Passport today. With just a brief overview. This will not be a death by PowerPoint. And then Levant and I will have a bit of back and forth, which I think will probably be more exciting. So just to tell you what the Learning Passport is, I'm kind of the chief of it. It's been a pretty crazy last 18 months for us. We were just selected as one of Time's 100 Best Inventions for 2021. We also won some Fast Company Awards this year, so we were very honored to be on that list. Last year, the PMI recognized us as one of the most influential projects. We were actually number 3 overall. We beat Tesla. I tweeted at Elon Musk. He did reply to me. So what is the Learning Passport? It is 4 things. It's the ability to serve local contextualized content to learners anywhere around the world, to stitch that together with some of the best global content that we have. We have a curriculum framework that allows us to understand the relationships between those 2 content sets. There's a big supportive environment with all of UNICEF's education programming. Psychosocial support, socio-emotional learning are very important things that get delivered in those education programs. But most of all, it's a technology platform that we are co-building with our flagship partner of Microsoft. The technology platform does some interesting things, which I'll try to quickly walk you through. We meet people where they are. It's one of the big mantras of the Learning Passport. Meet the users where they are in a language that they understand, in a context that they're familiar with. We have use cases that really span the educational life cycle of a child, all the way from 3 years old through to 18 and even beyond in technical and vocational training. One of the meetings I was having here today in Lebanon was about technical and vocational training in some of the camps. We reach people in the formal system, we reach people in the non-formal system, so learning centers, and then we reach people at home. Given COVID over the last 2 years-ish, the continuing lockdowns, a lot of learners find themselves at home, and those with access to the internet and even those without still have the right to access quality learning materials. And so we strive to really make that possible to allow kids to continue their learning journeys no matter where they are. Uh, this is about the LP. It's simple. One of the good things I think that we've really kept focus on is delivering a simple product that is easy to deploy and highly flexible to the use case. The complexity of the Learning Passport is the wide variety of places that it's being used. Simplicity allows us to really kind of deliver on the promise. It does some more interesting stuff too, like simulations that are more fun to learn. Here's some physics. Digital skills and digital literacy are also things that we do and deploy around the world. We have a mobile app that we publish. There's a benefit to, there's administration functions. There's things that teachers and administrators can do in both a granular nature and in a very overall kind of aggregate nature. We also print certificates that are customizable based on the context. One of the lessons that I've learned in the Learning Passport is in being flexible to the different deployment topologies. We have to be flexible in the way that our platform works. And that means that there are not a lot of Learning Passports around the world. It's branded as a lot of different things. It's a Ducatrachos in Honduras. It's a Scola Bauma in Timor-Leste. It's Campania in Laos. I even forget the name of it here in Lebanon. Um, but it's being used in a lot of different ways. It's flexible to deploy. It meets people where they are, and we see use cases really vary in the application of this in different countries in different ways. So the real story of the Learning Passport is one of deep flexibility. We're working on an implementation in Kosovo where we integrated it as an application in the Microsoft Teams ecosystem, which is pretty exciting for us. Kosovo is a highly connected place. I'm sure some of you know it. I think it is better at internet penetration than the UK. And so our thought was, okay, let's meet the learners where they are. It's a connected place. We'll deliver it that way. What's really exciting, though, about the Learning Passport is offline. So what we're doing is bringing a digital learning experience to kids without the internet. And we do this, it's not just like an app on a phone, it's not a tablet type of solution. It is a containerized application that lives on a specialized computer that acts as a server, you would consider it, that allows different learners using browsers on their own devices to log into the network, log into the application, create profiles, create credentials, and go on a personalized learning journey, all without the internet. So this is, the kids can't come to the cloud. A lot of the world is disconnected. So we bring the cloud to the kids. It's a pretty exciting thing, and there's a lot of programs or companies or organizations that have tried to do offline learning. None of them have done it in the way of taking the cloud applications and bringing them onto the box, so as to allow a progressive learning journey for an individual to start their learning offline, and then when they get to the internet, they can actually log in and continue where they left off. So we're really excited about that. It is something that I think in 2022 we're going to see really take off around the world. Here in Lebanon as well, they're gonna run it. So that is highly technical, complex, but it is highly exciting in answering the very valid criticism to UNICEF and other digital learning providers in the COVID era, which is, what about kids that don't have the internet? How do you bring digital learning for kids without the internet? In a very UNICEF way, we said, oh no, we're doing that too. That's important for us. And so we're engineering new technical solutions to deliver that experience. We also use some pretty fun stuff in terms of updating those devices via USB sticks or SD cards, so they totally live in a place without the internet, which is really where the learners that UNICEF cares about lives, the most marginalized kids, the most vulnerable kids. And so engineering the solution for that offline context, and this is what Time has gotten really excited about, the Time Magazine Award, is a new thing that we're really excited to bring to all those kids without the internet. I think it's easy for us to forget that a lot of the world is unconnected. UNICEF is really working for those people, and it's something that we're really, really excited about doing. So while we have, I think we've cracked 2 million users online probably in the last couple of days. The offline impact story is, I think, really exciting for us, and you may even hear about it coming up over the next months or longer. It's something that's, I think, entirely something that UNICEF and Microsoft, as the world's biggest agency for children and the world's biggest software house, or one of, getting together and cracking a very difficult problem to solve, with the eye towards everyone has a right to a digital future, whether or not you have the internet in your home at the moment. And so with that, Valentina, who's with me and is a Bulgarian national, has been along with me on this crazy ride over the last 2 years. And so I wanted to give her a chance to talk to you on another perspective on what the last 18 months have been like in the Learning Passport kind of world or ecosystem. So Val, a few words from you, if you don't mind.
Thank you, Mark, and hi, everyone. Dobro večer. And my name is Valentina. Thanks for the presentation, Mark. I work with UNICEF and the LP Global team. I have been involved with this program since the beginning, and I have been fascinated on how this program has emerged over time and is being able to scale up and respond to the challenges caused by the pandemic. And I wanted to just talk to you about retrospectively how the whole idea about Learning Passport emerged. It was in 2017, and it emerged as a response to the global emergencies that have a devastating impact on children's learning potential by interrupting and delaying or just ceasing their education. And here is a short statistics. An estimated of 35 million children around the world have been forcibly displaced and nearly half of school-age refugee children are out of school. And moreover, girls are being nearly 2.5 times more likely to be out of school in conflict-affected countries compared to other countries. So to respond to this global education crisis, the Learning Passport initially was designed to be a global learning curriculum framework that would allow children and young people whose education has been disrupted due to an emergency to learn core subjects, and no matter where they're situated around the world, and receive a portable certification to support their entry into formal education systems. So initially, UNICEF collaborated with Cambridge University and the Interagency Network for Education in Emergencies to do a global research and explore this hypothesis for such global learning framework, which could be contextualized with ease and supported by the appropriate teaching and learning materials, and to have outcomes which are assessed and progress which is tracked. So in the beginning of 2020, this research was completed, and UNICEF, together with partners, we were planning on piloting feasibility missions, piloting in 2 countries the offline model. And the 2 countries were Bangladesh and Kenya. While the pilots were still in the planning phase, everything had to be put on hold because the global COVID-19 pandemics happened. And then to respond to this global situation, UNICEF, together with Microsoft support, has implemented a significant shift in strategy, and we expanded this digital education project to support the 1.6 billion children and young people who were unable to receive education due to school closures because of the pandemic. So Timor-Leste was the first country to launch the Learning Passports nationally and use the platform for their primary and secondary formal education. That happened on April 20th, 2020, if I'm not mistaken, Mac. So we were able to scale up and expand so quickly because of various reasons. And the next slide should be. First of all, we already had established partnerships ecosystem with Microsoft, being our partner on the technology side. Second, UNICEF's country offices structure is already in place. And as you know, UNICEF has presence and works for supporting the rights of children in more than 190 countries. So our mandate allowed us to carry out the conversations about deploying the LP with both country offices and ministries, governments. And finally, the LP is being recognized as a major digital learning tool for continuing and advancing the Reimagine Education agenda. And for those of you who are not familiar, the Reimagine Education is a global initiative that aims to ensure the largest generation of young people in history is prepared for the transition to work and be engaged citizens. As the world is facing global learning crisis, quality of and access to education are essential. So the availability and potential of technology means that digital learning should be part of a basic basket of essential services for every child and every young person. And I'm just going to leave for Mark to continue with the last slide, just to explain what we offer as part of the LP. Thank you. Mark, you are on mute.
Okay, sorry, unmuted. So what we realized, I think that the big lesson here is that the UNICEF team and the many sleepless nights that we kind of suffered through for this was the opportunity in the crisis of COVID. I mean, it was a very scary time. A lot of us, were dealing with a great deal of uncertainty, but on the Learning Passport side, we thought we had something that could make a difference, and there was a big cost of doing nothing. And so instead of doing nothing and living with that associated cost, which is very much like from a UNICEF humanitarian background, we say, let's give this a shot. I remember calling my counterparts at Microsoft and being like, I think we can do this. I realized that we had a highly scalable solution that could meet needs of kids. What we didn't really anticipate was how many countries would say, yeah, let's do it, and do it in different ways. So that was really exciting. And I think that decision was a good one. And I called Microsoft within a day. Satya Nadella tweeted that they were doing it. The executive director tweeted that we were doing it, and then we were doing it. So what we've settled on is kind of some pretty solid offers, which is online, offline, a mobile application that's free to access in perpetuity via a licensing agreement with Microsoft that we have in the partnership with Microsoft. UNICEF does a lot of the technical stuff and platform hosting and maintenance. Microsoft does a lot of the engineering. So we bring them requests for new features and functionalities, or we find bugs, or we see product enhancements, etc. And we have a dedicated team of engineers in Microsoft that works for us on that. But they've really stepped up and kind of believed in the mission. And then there's something like 85 or 90 people working on the Learning Passport in UNICEF around the world. We are really focused on technical support as close to the users or administrators as possible. So there's a very lean team in New York. It's like myself and Valentina and one other person. And the rest of the Learning Passport is based in countries all around the world. There's 16 live countries now. There's a total of around 50 in the pipeline, which is a quarter of the world. But when you look at the countries that UNICEF is operational in, which is 128 offices that we run programs in, it's closer to 2/5. And so that team also, I think, was really important. And my role as a leader of that team is kind of to enable success for those end users. And we're a very mission-driven organization, so that's kind of easy to do. I'm sure we'll share this the slide deck with the organizers, with Sylvia and the team. I'm Mac. You met Valentina. You can visit us at learningpassport.org to learn more. Thanks so much. I'll stop sharing my screen now, and Levon and I can get into questions.
Thank you, Mac. Thank you, Valentina. Thank you for being so concise about such a huge program. When we first started discussing with Mac what he might be talking about, we were thinking of, what might be really interesting to our audience, what might be interesting to me as a person. And I said to Mac, what would be interesting to me would be how we can turn such a big dream, such a big goal, education for everyone, for free, to a reality. And this is what the Learning Passport initiative is about. How such a huge program, which involves probably, you can tell me, Mark, how many people are involved, how many people stay behind this dream, how it has really turned into reality for, as you said, if I remember correctly, 2 million kids around the globe. So how many people are involved in this dream realization?
Well, it started with just a couple of us. Now I'd say, I don't know, there's like 100 in UNICEF. And then if you counted Microsoft, you'd probably be like more towards 120, 130, 140. It takes a huge team to deliver something on the scale with the ambition that we have. 2 million users. Now we're trying to reach 30 million in 2025. That was the original goal, and I think we'll probably go north of that. There are a lot of people, and part of my job was to really understand two big things. What is the program support structure? Like, who do you need in what chairs to deliver what services? And then the technical structure. How can we architect the actual optimal application to meet the needs of as many people as possible? And like I'm sure, some of the crowd deals with these type of things. What's the trade-offs there? How do you reach the most optimal distribution of those resources possible? It's complicated. But that's a really long answer to say that there's over 100 people working on this. Most of them are based in UNICEF country offices. The Microsoft engineers are all over the world. And part of, I think, my job was to create incentives for people to see where they could contribute in the program. Rather than saying, hey, will you do this? It was much more towards, hey, I have something that I think that you would really be interested in doing and would benefit you. So from 2 and like some negligible engineering from Microsoft to 80 or 90 now with some significant engineering with Microsoft. And UNICEF is a very big bureaucracy, like, I'm sure you're not so surprised at that. There's a lot of different divisions. We have contributors from at least like 5. So working across the house of UNICEF and taking advantage of our strengths, I think was an incentive game. And that's really, I think, that what we were able to do relatively successfully so far, knock on wood.
Yeah, thank you. So far, there are no questions from the audience. So let me ask you, so I can imagine that technology was a huge enabler in this program. When we discussed the topic of your presentation, I remember you saying technology doesn't reduce the number of people involved. Actually, it increases the number of people involved. So what can you say about this program? Was this confirmed? Was this actually a realization that you gained through your involvement in this program? Because a lot of people, as you know, as we discuss, are kind of concerned about what technology can do in terms of affecting their workplaces, their future. But I think your perspective, your experience in this program shows that there is another side. Technology actually gives us opportunity to get more people involved into such a noble initiative. Is that correct?
Yeah, and thanks. It's a really important point. And even before my current role in the Learning Passport, I've worked a lot in technology and humanitarian scenarios. The problem is that people that develop technology really approach it as if everything as technological solutionism. Everything is a killer app, like your iPhone will do it. Why do you need people? And what we find is there is no such thing as a killer app. There's no way that technology gets deployed without a huge human structure around it, and that the deployment of technology, even in like self-learning, right, so home-based education, requires more humans in the loop. So instead of this concept that technology of killer apps and technology solves problems, technology creates more things to manage. It raises expectations. It creates processes on top of processes. It creates interaction experiences, and particularly in education, the difference between a learner in Chelsea in London, or a fancy neighborhood in the Upper East Side in New York City or whatever, and rural Sierra Leone or rural Zimbabwe or rural Lebanon, the difference between those two people when you give them the same technology is the ecosystem of humans around that learner that get them to take that content and turn that into understanding. And what we're really trying to do is emphasize that shift in the education space to understand that the introduction of technology requires more humans in the loop. You need to facilitate with the teachers using devices. You need to troubleshoot the things. It's another set of things that can break. And so I am 100% convinced that there is no such thing as a killer application in business, in the public sector, in my life, right? And that humans in the loop of any technology projects are 100% essential for them to work and to get the benefit statement that is promised out of the application of those technologies. It is something that we see, and I think that some of the biggest failures in the tech space, particularly in the tech and humanitarian space or the tech and development space, is people introducing technology without thinking about the human structures that they would need around that program to deliver on that promise. I'm 100% a believer, and maybe even an evangelicist, to the fact that technology in education or elsewhere requires more humans in the loop.
Yeah, thank you. So while you were implementing this program across, if I remember, 16 countries, and you have 20 more countries in the pipeline, so did you see some differences in the implementation? Were there some constraints, some particular constraints? What were there differences in, yes, exactly, in the implementation of this Looking from the country perspective, from the country
Yeah,
point of view.
there's nothing but differences. There are no two same implementations. And one of the challenges for me was to figure out, how do I enable a structure that is going to allow for that contextualization of the delivery of the service? Like, can we do this the same way everywhere? The answer is no. And I think that from the fact that I've worked for UNICEF for like almost 15 years and have been around and have served in a lot of the different places and a lot of the different offices, context is king in our world. I think context is king in probably most people's worlds, and any project management or program management or management in general is a context and a cultural game, more than like the business rules. It's how do those things work in the context that they're in. Meaning, for the Learning Passport, we had to deliver a contextualized approach for all of the different countries using similar tools that we had at our disposal and in the tool set that we were trying to deploy. So even from the variance in the user base, right? So you have teachers in some place, you have early childhood learning in another place, the technical and vocational education here in Lebanon, all of those contextualized responses or those contextualized needs meant that we were doing something different in each country. And there are 16 now. There's like around 50 in total. So it's over 30 that are working on deploying Learning Passport now. Every one of them does it differently. Every one of them does it with their own locally curated content. So the content's totally different. The branding is different. And I think that one of the things that we emphasized was simplicity in the engineering and the product itself, but high levels of customization and adaptation. You can brand it differently. It can be different colors. It can be in different languages. All the content is entirely different. And so putting a skeleton approach in place rather than trying to over-engineer for the context, understanding that the offices had that knowledge of what the context was going to respond to in terms of the program that we had. I think that was also a key decision. We decided to not totally telegraph what the solution would be, or we tried to not totally architect what we would say around the thing. We said, here's a really flexible tool. We're going to work really hard to keep it really flexible. And on this journey, we get feedback from the varying users. And while that's like a wonderful thing in terms of project management and iterative software development, like, agile methodologies, etc., it becomes very difficult to prioritize those things due to the fact that the contexts are so different, right? So Kosovo, internet connectivity is great. Serbia or Montenegro, the launch is coming up, I think, next week or something like that, or in 2 weeks. Internet connectivity in Montenegro is great. The users have feedback about a certain set of functionalities, and they want some higher order stuff. They ask for more complicated things. Versus feedback in a place like Somalia, which just has a live Learning Passport, where connectivity is different. It's all mobile based, and it's a very mobile first country. That's actually very surprising how connected they are. But the feedback of those two sets of users is entirely different because they're reflecting the context of the program. They're not necessarily reflecting the technology as much as they're reflecting the reality that they're in. I was just in one of the refugee camps in Lebanon here today, where they have some of the long-standing Palestinian communities in South Beirut that live there. They have a basic problem around access to phones, right? So there's one phone in a family. How do you get I met a woman who had 7 kids and 1 phone in a family, and she says, you need to figure out for me a way to get all these 7 kids to be able to work on this phone, and so they can switch accounts and they can do, how does that feedback track against the feedback from somebody in Montenegro that wants a whole different experience? And so the complexity of the adaptations and the meeting of the context creates some very interesting problems for myself and the team about how to prioritize those interventions. And so I have to take a very 30,000 foot view on the things and say no to some people and say yes to some people based on that impact statement, not like an ease in an impact statement, not on what I think is more interesting. And what the other beautiful thing we've done is that because the Learning Passport team is so localized, right? They're based in countries, they know the context, they work very closely with the ministries or the governments if we're doing that, or the refugee community where we're doing that, and et cetera. Those people are part of both the global community but represent the local context, and that local context is where we find success, and it does go back to flexibility. When we have to chalk out the roadmap of what we're going to build in the next year, it's a really interesting conversation, and everyone kind of fights about what they think are more important. But there are, of course, pretty standard project management tooling that you can put into place there that helps me manage that that complexity and that, let's say, positive disagreement between the members of the Learning Passport team as they really advocate for their user bases. I just have to think in terms of like the longer term product life cycle, what we're going to see coming up and what kind of is maximum utility for a maximum amount of people that creates some maximum impact. And when we're talking about millions of people, it's like, you know, it's quite a bit to balance. And not everyone is going to be 100% satisfied. I once had a job where, you know, if you left and everyone was 15% mad at you, or 15%, you know, everyone is 15% mad at you, that was a successful day. Trying to balance that 15% mad at me across the Learning Passport universe. But it really, the complexity is in the context, but the success is in the context too, and that's a super interesting thing for us.
Yeah, what did change the most for you or for the team while you were implementing? Because in a project, you usually start, you know, we talk about scope, we talk about, you know, what we envision at the moment, because we have limited information, so we have something in mind, and you start. And then as you take the journey, the path evolves and unfolds. So what was kind of the biggest aha moment on this journey for you and for the team?
Our scope exploded. I mean, there's no other way to put it. We were working in 2 countries and we're kind of trying to figure out offline stuff and how does that work. And, you know, there was like a couple hundred users in the beginning of 2019. And they're 2 million now. So we were thinking, you know, the thousands. We were working on a very complex technical problem, which is how to bring digital education to kids without the internet. I specifically remember the moment and kind of the fear associated with that moment when I realized that we had a highly scalable cloud application and I had presence in all the offices around the world. And so what we were doing is trying to put that highly scalable cloud application on a box. But what we had was a highly scalable cloud application. So that means that we could turn it on really fast for different learners to meet different needs, like as I've talked about before. And then I realized that UNICEF has an office in pretty much every capital in the world where this is going to be a relevant tool. Like it's, you know, it's something where the personal relationships between the Minister of Education and the UNICEF Chief of Education in those offices are a huge, huge benefit. And so I was literally walking over a bridge between Queens and Brooklyn in New York City, and I was like, oh man, I think we can do this. And so I called the directorship and I called the very, you know, there's the executives, like the heads, the senior folks in the organization, being like, hey, I think we can do this, but it's going to explode everything. Like, we are going to rapidly need to build a team around this. We are going to really make some guesses as to how this is going to go. And, you know, you start with imperfect information, but you start like in an ecosystem that you kind of should understand. The ecosystem exploded. That's COVID. I mean, the world got turned upside down and it's still kind of upside down. And so we had to pivot in that moment and see the opportunity in that chaos and not be afraid if it wasn't going to work, because if it didn't work, so what? Like, we were still in the same place that we were, or that we were in, which is messing around in offline in a couple countries and figuring that out. And, you know, I'm kind of a pretty nerdy person at heart, and that all the questions in offline were really exciting to me. How do you do something that no one's kind of done before and use advanced technologies to do this and build a team of people that really understand that that specific niche of a problem statement? But I looked at the assets that we had on the team and I was said, well, if we can make a difference, we might as well try to. And if it doesn't work, okay, that's fine. Like the failure. I'm not a big like fail mantra, fail forward, all the move fast and break things. I mean, a lot of things are broken, when you move fast and you break things, and that's not a great outcome. But the crisis of COVID created an opportunity that we were going to try to understand, without 100% of guarantee towards success. So it's not like we started with an idea and we like shifted it a little. Like we started with an idea and then everything around that idea exploded. And we said, okay, like what can we do with this idea? And as that world kind of reformulated, we say, wait, hold on, we might be relevant in some of these places. And from 20 users to 2 million in 18 months is a pretty crazy ramp of a journey. In from zero or whatever, messing around in a couple of countries to like full national level implementations in 16 or subnational. It's a wild difference. It's been a lot of work, and it's been a lot of risk taking, but in the end, again, it's like the cost of doing nothing was too high for the organization. And so we had to do something in that space, and I'm glad we did. Like it's killed me, but it's been a worthy journey and an entirely exciting and terrifying one.
Yeah, I believe you said it exploded, and because you want to have 30 million kids in a few years joining this this initiative. I was thinking, what might be the binding for the system to continue growing? We talk about about processes, about structures. So what would be the glue for sustaining the system, for keeping it moving and evolving? I have the answer, but I wanted to hear it from you, and I just want to compare.
Yeah. Is this a test?
Because once we have, I was thinking of huge organizations, what keeps them moving, and this is a huge organization. It's a huge project. So what will keep this project evolving? What will keep it alive?
Well, first of all, and this isn't the answer you're looking for, which I will get to. It's the need, right? The need and the right for kids to be educated and the right for kids to have a digital future. Like that will keep. We're not going to lose the customer base. Like they are out there and there are more of them that we can handle. 30 million is nothing, right? If you look at 1.6 billion kids that were out of school for COVID, that's 30 million is zero. Like it's 0.5%. So there's a need and there will continue to be a need and we will kind of go there. Now, the answer you are looking for, which I'm a big believer in, is I work for one of the most bureaucratic organizations in the world. It's the UN. Like it's a bureau. When you look up bureaucracy, there's the there's the headquarters building. There's of the UN. There's a General Assembly, and that's a bureaucracy, right? And bureaucracy particularly likes to govern in terms of process and rules. That's how we do things. I was in an office once, and there was an SOP, a standard operating procedure for going to the bathroom. I'm not kidding. And I will not tell you where that office is. But very, very traditional in the way that a lot of the organization thinks is bureaucratic. Like the amount of forms that you have to fill out to do something is crazy. I have a team of like ambitious kind of misfits. And I hired people that were not very UN like. Like they had experience in the UN, but they weren't people that were trying to work themselves up the chains to be the representatives and to follow the rules. And they were people that were much more interested in the impact statements, and that those that weren't were interested in the technical problems. So there's a deck from Netflix in 2009, I think, where they were just this growing company. It wasn't like now they've taken over the world, but when Netflix was smaller and scrappy, they have this wonderful deck about culture. And I go back to it, like I learn new things when I go back to it like once every 6 months. It's just this very like visionary thing. And in there it talks a lot about how you form a culture. how do you form a culture in a team or a company or a program or a project or whatever it is. And one of, I think, the main things that I try to do is the culture of the Learning Passport, which is kind of like almost like a startup within one of the world's biggest bureaucracies. And we behave very horizontally, and we move, like we try to be quite nimble towards meeting people's needs. So as a manager in the UN, I had two options. I could have governed all this stuff with a lot of process, a lot of rules, a lot of standing operator procedures, but that would murder the creativity and the ambition of the team that I had. Or I could try to work on a cultural level, right? And start a vibe or whatever, a culture of the Learning Passport that was like, we're a little scrappy. We're not your traditional bureaucrats. We're really interested in flexibility. We're really interested in speed. Like the fastest we deployed a Learning Passport was 6 days in that first one in Timor. They called us, and 6 days later there were learners on the platform, and that's fast even in software speak, and so what I really reference is a culture will do as good as rules in a lot of cases, because if people understand where we're trying to go, and a culture which is founded off a mission statement, and the mission statement of the LP is the passport to a digital future for every kid, like when you get people oriented towards the north of what that mission is, you don't have to govern them as much, and you don't really have to assume that you have to govern people. So in the Learning Passport land, it's like, well, let's create a culture instead of a lot of rules and let people flourish within the culture, or not, right? And if you don't work on the culture, then you're not the right fit for the way that we're doing things or the team. And it's kind of the self-selection methodology where people fit or they don't, or they need a lot of rules or they don't. And if you need a lot of rules, we don't have the time for that, frankly. We're too busy. And we're trying to really meet people where they are. So I think that cultural thing is really important. And I also realize that we're not heart surgeons. Like if we mess up, we can fix it. We're not bankers where if we accidentally transfer $1 billion somewhere, it's like, whoops, you're in trouble. We're not like at that level of consequence that we can't make mistakes on the way and fix it. And I think that I highly recommend people to reference this Netflix. You can find it online. But it really had me thinking about running a very nimble and expansive team full of like ambitious younger kind of people, in a bureaucracy that was so rule focused and rule bound. And a lot of my job is dealing with all those rules and the paperwork and the complexity and the process. And Valentine actually does a lot of that as well. So our folks are not exposed to that. Well, I have people working for me that have no idea about the rules of UNICEF. Like in terms of like the process rules, they know not to do things that would not be good for the organization. But in terms of the forms and the paperwork, we centralize a lot of that stuff to give people freedom in order to do what they need to do, which is meet kids' needs, right? So yeah, I think culture is something that I've really tried to spend a lot of time on, and approach it with interest, because I think it is entirely important to do instead of a bunch of rules that everyone has to follow. And doing that virtually with a team where you're not all in the same office is hard. Like, how do you get the feeling of an individual when you're not able to go get lunch with them or go get a coffee or go get a beer or like whatever it is? How do you create culture in a virtual working environment? Which is complicated, and I do a bunch of reading about it and stuff. And so we do like little fun things, but there's a lot of ways to do it. I think that the big takeaway is that culture can outmaneuver rules, and that the important thing for being the manager that I am was to really think about culture, and to spend less time on rules. And if you need rules, they're going to come up. And I'm in a big organization where there will be guardrails. Like you can't go too crazy, but we try to create freedom for our folks to do the right things according to what we kind of believe in and according to the culture of the Learning Passport, which is super, super mission driven. I mean, we work for UNICEF, right? So we're pretty oriented towards a mission about children and their right to education, in our part of UNICEF at least. But it was important to differentiate the Learning Passport from UNICEF's rules and to give us the freedom that we needed in order to deliver the service, given the needs out there with how COVID kind of really, again, exploded everything.
Yeah, it seems like the Learning Passport initiative is like a startup inside UNICEF. It's like
Kind
yeah,
of.
kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
They don't let me be CEO, though. You can't be CEO in UNICEF. I tried.
yes, yeah. The sense of purpose, this intangible glue is the foundation of the culture. Thank you for describing it so well, because it is very important to keep the spirit, the spirit high, and the mission alive, and not kind of suppressed by, as you mentioned, this huge bureaucratic system that we all that we can just can imagine in UNICEF, because I haven't worked there, but I can only imagine how it might be.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
there are some rules. I mean, I think that rules are made by people that are super risk averse, especially when you deal with public funds. Like we deal with public money, people give us money to deliver education services, and so you need to be damn careful about that, right? Like those rules are in effect for the right reason. But as long as I know that the culture of the Learning Passport is to do the right thing with that money, and I see the money, and we know we know where every penny gets spent for sure. A lot of the other rules, like if we are adhering to the mission statement and the culture, the rules about protecting the organization from like bad action or whatever are kind of moot. They're irrelevant. If we're really identified to the mission and we're delivering on that mission, that can take the place of a lot of the rules that are made to ensure that people stick on a mission. And we're not that big yet, you know what I mean? A couple, like 100 people, 150 people is not a massive organization by any means. There are 13,000 people, staff members that work for UNICEF, or like 18,000 if you count consultants, and there are 800 people that just work on education around the world. So we're smaller than that, but maybe not by much. But yeah, I think that your worst nightmares are probably pretty accurate about how bureaucratic the UN is, but there's freedom in there when you realize that you can do a lot of things if you understand the intent of those rules and if you understand how to use them, or how to basically take them yourself so your team doesn't have to understand them. And that's like the business rules, right? Like if you want people to succeed, do they need to know the reason for every different type of form? Like, no. They don't need to see those forms. They need to do the job. They need to get kids on and learning, right? We need to deliver excellent and engaging content to learners. That's your job, not whether or not like the way to move funds around or how to procure a certain amount of things or whatever. Like that's not the relevant part. And so I do a lot of that stuff so the team has no idea about it, because the freedom of the culture is super important to me. But yeah, I mean, it's the UN, so there are a ton of rules and processes.
Yeah, and we can all agree, and the audience this late hour can now see the reasons why you have also been awarded by Times for the best innovations for 2020 or 2021. You can correct me.
Yeah, 21.
2021, yes.
We were a most influential PMI in 2020.
Yes. And now we can see why. We can see that having this sense of purpose, a culture that drives people to be always awake, motivated, and it gets rewarded, it gets recognized. And I can only wish you that this initiatives impacts the world and the kids with a much bigger pace and speed. On this note, I would like to end the conversation for today, and maybe if you would like to say a few words as kind of closing remarks, you're welcome to do so.
Thanks. I would say we're just getting started. The education crisis is huge, that there is as many seats around the table as people that want to sit in them to try and work on it, and to deliver better education services for kids. And so in Learning Passport and UNICEF, with our partners Microsoft and all of our other partners too, I mean, everyone's lined up around that idea, and I think they all get it. Like, this is a kind of once in a lifetime opportunity to deliver these things in this great uncertainty that COVID created. And so the opportunity in the crisis has been huge for us. And so we're really thankful to have the teams of people and organizations around the Learning Passport that we do. And they have been 100% instrumental in getting this off the ground and getting this like delivery to kids. We want to take this huge. Like, I think 30 million is just going to be a sign on the highway as we go. So yeah, that's what I'm really excited about. And I do, like, from my perspective in this, think that like management, project management or program management and stuff is moving into a leadership space and is like away from just a very technical function. And in that leadership space, it is a lot of the soft stuff I talk about, like culture and risk and those type of things. And I think that that is probably the biggest thing I've learned over the last 2 years. That is, you know, management is leadership in a way. Like, you can be a manager. I chose the route of like the cultural, let's try to like do this leadership thing rather than let's manage and let's create a lot of rules and processes. And I think that what's emerging as I see the best practices, like the leadership and the cultural aspect. So yeah, I think it's really excited. I invite everyone to keep up with us on learningpassport.org. We have social media channels, etc. And to watch this journey. I think that you're going to start to see some stuff for us in the offline space that's going to be highly, highly exciting, that no one's ever done before. So with that, I'd like to thank UNICEF, who pays me. Thanks, UNICEF. Thanks, Microsoft. Thanks to all of our partners. Thanks to the PMI, the Bulgaria chapters. Thanks for everybody for staying up late. Thanks for Val for helping me do this. And thanks to you for facilitating a nice session. I hope that I wasn't too boring for everybody. I know that it's late there. So thanks for everything.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Valentina. I believe this won't be our first meeting in this format. We'll stay in touch, and we look forward to hearing more about this initiative, hearing about winning more awards, because we know that behind these awards are a lot of happy kids, a lot of smiles, and a lot of big dreams realized. Thank you so much for what you do, and we look forward to seeing you in the near future. Thank you.
Thanks, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a nice evening in Beirut, and Valentina in the US.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being with us. Благодаря ти, Валентина.
Goodbye.